Look at you, my wife Emily said, staring right through me. 14 years and all you are is a paycheck. I want the house, the trucks, the business, everything. And don't you dare fight me. That line cut deeper than the cheating. Not the money, the disrespect. The roof over my kids' heads, every late night, every dime I worked my hands to the bone for, reduced to a shopping list. My lawyer gripped my arm. Miles, we can stop this. I didn't blink. Fine. Take it all. She smirked, thinking she'd cleaned me out. She didn't know the moment she took everything, she also took the one thing that would bury her, in black and white. Stick with me. Next I'll show you what I found in the books, and why I stayed silent. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and cheap paper. Emily sat across from me with perfect posture, like she was closing on a house, not ending a marriage. Her eyes didn't soften once. I want the house, she said. Both vehicles, full control of the business, and primary custody. No pause, no shame, just bullet points. She slid her demand letter forward with 2 fingers like it might stain her. I stared at the page and felt my jaw tighten. In my head, one sentence kept rising up. You don't get to cheat, steal my peace, then shop my life like it's on clearance. But I didn't say it. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me crack. Harold Bennett, my lawyer, flipped through the paperwork and I watched his hands betray him. 30 years in family court and his fingers still trembled, just a little, at the numbers she was asking for. He cleared his throat twice before he spoke. Emily didn't look at him. She looked at me, waiting for me to beg. I stayed quiet, let the silence do the talking. And that's when Harold finally leaned in, lowered his voice, and said something that made me realize this meeting wasn't about divorce anymore, it was about who was going to bleed. Harold didn't sugarcoat it. Miles, she's not entitled to the business, he said, tapping the page hard enough to leave a dent. We can fight this. We should fight this. He started listing options, motions, objections, ways to slow it down, ways to protect what I'd built. The kind of words lawyers use when they believe the law can still make things fair. Emily's mouth curled into that small, private smile. Not joy, not relief. A smirk. Like she'd already spent the money. Like my father's company was just a prize she'd won for being ruthless. I glanced at the corner of the room and saw my reflection in the dark window. Tired eyes, work-worn hands. My old man used to say, a man can lose a lot, but he doesn't lose his name. That line came back so clear it felt like he was standing behind me. Harold kept talking. If you give in, she'll take you for everything. I looked straight at Emily. I let the silence stretch until it started to hurt. Then I put my palm on the agreement, steady, flat, and said the one sentence that made the whole room freeze. Give her everything. Not because I was weak, but because I finally knew exactly where this was going. Harold stared at me like I'd just confessed to a crime. His face went stiff, the way a man looks when he thinks you've finally broken. Miles, you can't be serious, he said, voice low, like he didn't want to embarrass me in front of her. Across the table, Emily's smile flickered, just for a second. Not fear, more like surprise that I wasn't begging. Then it settled back into that smug calm, like she'd trained herself to believe she deserved whatever she could take. Papers slid toward me. I picked up the pen and signed a few initial pages like a man with no fight left. I could feel Harold watching my hand, waiting for it to shake. It didn't, because my mind wasn't on the house, or the trucks, or even the company. My mind was locked on one phrase, the kind of phrase men ignore until it ruins them: assets and liabilities. Those words weren't just legal language, they were weight, they were ownership, they were consequence. I didn't explain any of that, not to Harold, not to anyone, not, a trap only works if it feels real, if the person walking into it believes they're winning. I didn't explain any of that, because if she knew what I knew at that moment, she would have run. That night my phone rang while I was sitting alone in my apartment, staring at a wall like it had answers. Mom flashed on the screen. I almost didn't pick up. I didn't have the strength to hear her break, but I did. Margaret's voice came through thin and shaky. Miles, please tell me you're not doing this, she said. Your father built that business from nothing. That shop kept the lights on. It put food on the table. It kept a roof over our heads when life got hard. Every word hit like a blade, because she wasn't talking about money. She was talking about survival, about the kind of security a working man spends his whole life trying to give his family without ever asking for credit. "I know," I said, and my throat tightened. "I know what it means." "So why would you just hand it over to her?" she whispered. "Honey, I'm scared you're not thinking straight." I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to lay the whole plan out on the kitchen table and watch her shoulders drop with relief. But I couldn't. Not yet. "Mom," I said, steady as I could, "trust me. My name's still mine." She went quiet, like she was listening for cracks in my voice, afraid I'd snap. Jack showed up the next morning like a storm that had been holding itself back. Firefighter jacket half-zipped, shoulders filling my doorway, eyes red like he hadn't slept. He didn't even sit down at first, just paced my small kitchen, jaw working. "So it's true," he said. "You're really gonna let her walk away with everything? Dad's company? The house we fixed up with our own hands? You're just gonna hand it over like it's nothing?" I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I'd already learned that words don't calm a man like Jack. Proof does. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick folder. It landed on the table with a heavy thud, the kind of sound that makes you feel trouble in your chest. I slid it across to him. "What's this?" he asked, still angry. "Read," I said. He flipped the first page, then the second. His face changed in stages. Confusion, then disbelief, then something darker. By page 5, his breathing was shallow, like he'd just walked into smoke. He looked up at me for the first time like he was seeing me new, and I said it quietly, because quiet is where the truth hits hardest. "She doesn't know what she's really taking. And once she signs for it, she won't be able to give it back." Jack's hands tightened around the folder so hard the paper bent. He kept turning pages, faster now, like if he moved quickly enough he could outrun what he was reading. Fake invoices. Vendors with names that meant nothing. Transfers that didn't match any job we'd ever done. Dates that lined up too perfectly to be accidents. This isn't a couple grand," he muttered. "No," I said. "It's not." His eyes snapped to a number and stayed there. Then he found another, and another. The kind of totals that make your stomach go hollow because you start doing the math on what that money was supposed to be. New boots for the kids, repairs on the trucks, payroll for guys who trust you, the roof over your head, every dime. Jack swallowed hard. "Miles, is this real?" I didn't look away. "Every penny." He exhaled through his nose, slow and shaky, like he was trying not to explode in my kitchen. "So what are you gonna do?" he asked, voice low. I leaned back, calm on purpose. "I'm gonna let her take the business." Jack blinked, stunned. "Why would you do that?" "Because if she wants to own it," I said, tapping the folder, "then she can own all of it. The assets and the dirt." He stared at me, and a rough smile finally broke through the anger. "That means," he said slowly, "she's about to inherit her own crime." I nodded. "Exactly. Most men would have fought right here, and that's exactly how they would have lost everything." Jack sat there staring at those pages like they might start smoking. The room felt smaller, tighter, and I realized something. If you didn't grow up where I did, you might think this is just money, just paperwork. But where I'm from in the Midwest, a man's word is currency. It's what you spend every day without realizing it. My old man started our company in a one-car garage with a dented van and a toolbox older than I was. No investors, no fancy pitch decks, just early mornings, busted knuckles, and customers who paid because he showed up and did the job right. That's how I learned to work. Hands to the bone, no complaints, no shortcuts. Jack went his own way. He became a firefighter, running into burning houses while I stayed behind, building a business out of sweat and invoices. Different uniforms, same idea. You do what needs doing. Then my father died. Fast, unfair, one ordinary morning that turned permanent. I stood in that garage afterward, smelling oil and sawdust, and made myself a promise I've never broken. I'm not letting anyone wipe their boots on the name he left us. I grew the company the slow way, the only way I knew. one contract at a time, one satisfied customer telling another. We added trucks when we could afford them, not when we wanted them. Hired good men who showed up on time and didn't make excuses. The kind of crew you trust with keys to your shop and your reputation. I didn't get rich fast. Honestly, I didn't get rich at all. But we made ends meet. The lights stayed on, food stayed on the table. And when Lily and Noah ran through the house laughing, it felt like proof that the grind meant something. That's what I thought I was building. Home. Not just walls and a mortgage, but a place where my kids felt safe. A place where my wife and I were supposed to be on the same side. So when Emily started drifting, little complaints at first, then constant dissatisfaction, I told myself it was stress. I told myself if I just pushed harder, provided more, she'd come back around. But looking back now, I can admit the truth without flinching. I was busy building a future, while she was quietly checking out of it. Emily wasn't always cold. That's the part people don't understand until it happens to them. When I met her, she had this easy laugh, like she could turn an ordinary moment into something worth keeping. I was at a supply counter after a long day, grease on my hands, work boots still wet from a crawl space. She smiled at me like I mattered. And I'll be honest, back then, I needed that. I wasn't a suit and tie guy. I didn't talk like a businessman. I talked like a man who fixes problems and pays his bills. Emily made me feel like that was enough. Like I was enough. We got married small and simple. I remember thinking, good, no show, just us. I believed we were building something together, two people pulling in the same direction. Then Lily came. 2 years later, Noah. The house got louder, the days got longer. I worked more, she handled more at home, and we ran on coffee and routine. It was exhausting, but it was honest. The kind of tired that feels like progress. Those early years weren't perfect, but they were good years. And I truly believed, deep down, we were a team. If you're a man watching this, here's the question you don't want to answer. At what point does providing stop being enough? Somewhere along the way, Emily started looking at our life like it was falling behind. It wasn't one big blow-up, it was a slow drip. A comment about the kitchen, a sigh when she got in the truck, a look at someone else's vacation photos that lasted a little too long. Everybody's upgrading, Miles, she'd say. New houses, new cars, trips. We're just stuck. Stuck. Like the bills I paid were nothing. Like the business I was growing with my bare hands was a hobby. Like the roof over our kids' heads didn't count unless it came with granite counters and a bigger zip code. So I did what a lot of men do when they feel their home slipping. I worked harder. I busted my tail, took extra jobs, stayed late, told myself if I could just bring in more, she'd soften. She didn't. The more hours I gave the business, the fewer I had for her. And the less I was home, the colder she got. Quiet, impatient, already gone in her eyes. One night she swept her hand around our living room and said, flat as ice, I didn't sign up for this. And in that moment, the house didn't feel like home. It felt like a cage she wanted out of. Emily quit her little part-time job like it was some grand sacrifice. The kids need me, she said. I'm going to focus on the family. I wanted to believe that. I really did. Because the alternative meant admitting something ugly, admitting that our home was becoming a place where effort only flowed one way. But nothing got better. The house stayed messy. Dinner became takeout more nights than not. Lily's backpack sat untouched by the door. Noah's cleats stayed in the hallway like nobody cared who tripped. And every conversation, every single one, looped back to money. You work all the time, Emily would say. Because the bills don't stop, I'd say. And I don't feel loved, she'd snap. That's what it felt like, being dragged between bills and feelings like both were drowning and I only had two hands. The business was growing fast enough that the paperwork started stacking up like snowdrifts. Payroll, invoices, taxes. I was exhausted, trying to keep the lights on at work and at home. So I made a decision that felt responsible at the time. I told myself it was how I'd save everything. I hired an accountant. And without knowing it, I handed over the keys to my life to the man who would stab me in the back. Tom Reeves walked into my office in a crisp suit that didn't match the dust on my shelves. Mid-40s, confident handshake. The kind of smile that says, I've already figured you out. He talked fast but clean. Efficiency, optimization, growth. He made it sound like my whole business was a machine that just needed the right hands on the controls. And I was tired. The kind of tired that makes you grateful for anyone who sounds certain. So I trusted him. I gave him bank logins, vendor lists, contracts, everything. I told myself, this is what grown men do. They get help. I didn't stop to think that the wrong help can ruin you faster than no help at all. Tom started dropping by the house. Just to go over numbers, he'd say. He'd sit at my kitchen table like he belonged there, talking shop while my kids ran around his polished shoes. Emily would laugh at his jokes. Not polite laughter, real laughter. The kind I hadn't heard from her in a long time. I noticed it. Of course I did. The way she leaned in. The way she smoothed her hair without thinking. The way her eyes stayed on him a second too long. And what did I do? I lied to myself, quiet and steady. It's nothing. It's just business. Mom cornered me after Sunday dinner the way she always did when something sat wrong in her chest. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize it. That's how I knew it mattered. "Miles," she said, eyes steady. "Something's not right." I tried to brush it off because I needed to believe my house was still a home. "Mom, please," I sighed. "Emily and we're just going through it." Mom didn't blink. "I've watched people my whole life," she said quietly. "She looks at you like you're in the way, and that accountant, he's too comfortable." I hated how true that felt. I hated it more because I still chose denial. I kissed her cheek, changed the subject, and drove home telling myself she was seeing ghosts. But her words followed me like sand in my boot. Small, irritating, impossible to ignore. Over the next week, I started noticing what I'd trained myself not to see. Emily checked her phone at the table, at the kids' games, in the middle of conversations. She'd smile at a screen, then go blank when she caught me looking. I chose to believe we were fine, and that choice was the most expensive mistake I ever made. I chose denial, and that choice cost me more than the affair ever would. That's the moment I learned something every man learns too late. Denial feels peaceful, until it costs you everything. And if you're telling yourself right now, "I'd know if something was wrong," I said those exact words while it was already happening in my own house. It happened on a Tuesday in March, the kind of day that's supposed to be ordinary. We had a big job scheduled across town, but the general contractor called and pushed it back a week. Permits, delays, the usual. Most guys would have gone back to the shop. I didn't. I thought, maybe I'll surprise her. Maybe we can feel like a team again for an hour. I stopped at a gas station and bought yellow roses. Emily used to love yellow roses, back when small things still meant something. I pulled into the driveway around noon. Her car was there. From the outside, everything looked normal. Same curtains, same porch light. But the second I stepped inside, the air felt wrong. Too quiet. Not peaceful. Empty. "Emily?" I called. No answer. I set the roses on the counter. The kitchen smelled faintly like takeout and perfume. My boots sounded too loud on the floorboards as I walked through the living room listening. Then I heard it. Upstairs. Voices. Low. Muffled. Close. My heart started pounding before my brain could catch up, like my body already knew what my mind was still trying to deny. I climbed the stairs slow, hand tight on the rail, and stopped at our bedroom door. That's when I understood. The silence wasn't the scary part. It was what was hiding behind it. I pushed the bedroom door open and the world didn't explode. It collapsed. Emily was in my bed with Tom Reeves, tangled up like this house belonged to them. Down the hall, my kids' doors were cracked open the way they always were. Lily's nightlight still plugged in. Noah's little baseball glove on the floor. I stood there with yellow roses in my hand like a punchline. For a second, I couldn't even breathe right. It wasn't rage first. It was disbelief, like my brain refused to file what my eyes were seeing. Emily screamed my name, high and sharp. Tom scrambled off the bed, grabbing his clothes, trying to cover himself and his guilt at the same time. He wouldn't look at me. Not once. And something inside me went cold. Not angry cold. Winter cold. Like a switch flipped and shut off the part of me that used to beg for answers. Emily started talking, fast, messy, reaching for excuses like blankets. Tom kept buttoning his shirt with shaking hands. I didn't move, I didn't shout. I just stared at them, roses drooping in my grip, and realized this wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. "It's not what you think," Emily blurted, pulling the sheet up like dignity could be stitched back together. Her eyes were wide, frantic, like she was the one being attacked. I didn't even look at her at first. I looked at Tom. He was still half-dressed, fumbling with his belt, jaw tight. A man who'd sat at my kitchen table, laughed with my kids in the next room, and shook my hand like we were partners. "How long?" I asked. My voice didn't shake. That scared me more than anger would have. Emily's mouth opened, then she glanced at Tom, like she needed permission to tell the truth. Tom swallowed. "About a year," he said. A year. 52 weeks of smiles. 52 weeks of nodding at me across dinner. 52 weeks of walking into my home like he belonged there, while I paid him to help my business. I stepped toward him. Not fast, not wild, just enough to make him back up. "Get out," I said, "now, before I do something I can't take back." He left without a word. And when the door shut, Emily started crying, like tears could erase time. I stared at her and thought, this is only the beginning. Standing there, I didn't know it yet, but that bedroom was the first crime scene. Emily's crying got louder once Tom was gone. Ugly, desperate crying, like volume could change facts. She followed me down the hall, barefoot on hardwood, voice shaking. "You're never home," she said. "You left me alone. What did you expect?" I stared at the family photos on the wall as if they belonged to someone else. "I was providing," I said. That was the truth. The simplest truth. The kind of truth men don't dress up. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. It wasn't enough. That line landed clean. Not dramatic. Just final. Like she'd been rehearsing it. Like she'd already decided that everything I did would always come up short. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I grabbed my keys and walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. The night air hit my face like a slap, and I drove to my mother's house on muscle memory. I sat on her front porch until morning, watching the streetlight flicker and listening to nothing. No tears, no shouting, just a hollow space where my marriage used to be. That's when it clicked. Emily didn't leave me that night. She'd left a long time ago. Only her body was still in the house. Most men think betrayal ends in that room. That's where my real problem started. A week later, the papers came. Not a conversation, not a meeting, just a thick envelope that felt heavier than it should have. Emily wasn't just filing for divorce. She was coming to collect house, vehicles, primary custody, and the business, my father's business, like it was a prize for whoever played dirtier. Reading it, I felt something sharp rise in my chest. Not heartbreak this time, but a cold kind of disbelief. Like, "You really think you can do this and sleep at night?" Harold called the same afternoon. His voice was tight. "Miles, this is extortion," he said. "These demands are insane. We can push back hard. We can bury her in court." I stared at the envelope on my kitchen table, then at my hands. Work hands. Hands that had built something real. And I said the only thing that made sense in my head. "Not yet," I told him. Harold went silent. "Not yet?" "No," I said. "I need to check something first." Because cheating is betrayal. Divorce is war. But the way that demand letter was written, it didn't just sound greedy. It sounded planned. That night, after I got off the phone with Harold, I drove to the shop alone. No crew, no noise, just the hum of the soda machine and the old heater clicking on and off like it couldn't decide if it was worth trying. I unlocked my office and pulled everything I could reach. 3 years of bank statements, vendor invoices, check ledgers, payroll records. I stacked them on my father's desk until the wood disappeared. Page after page, thick as a wall, the kind of paperwork that usually just feels boring. That night it felt alive. I started slow, running my finger down rows of numbers the way I'd trace a pipe looking for a leak. The first hour, nothing obvious. The second hour, a weird payment. Small, easy to miss. Then another. Then a vendor name I didn't recognize tied to a job I remembered clearly. Close to midnight, I found the first fake invoice. The language was wrong. The pricing was off. The address didn't exist, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The second one showed up like a crack spreading in glass. Then the third. It hit me like cold water. Money had been leaking out of my company, the way water leaks from a split line inside a wall. Quiet, constant, and ruining everything behind the paint. By sunrise, my office looked like a paper storm had blown through. Statements and invoices covered the floor, the chair, the filing cabinets. My eyes felt gritty, like I'd been breathing dust all night. But I couldn't stop. I kept counting, kept circling numbers, kept matching dates to jobs, and the total kept climbing, 10,000, 50, 100, until it stopped feeling real. When I finally added it all up, my stomach dropped. Just under $400,000. Gone. Not in one big theft. In dozens of clean little cuts, shell companies, vendor ghosts. Materials we never bought for jobs we absolutely finished. Whoever did it wasn't sloppy. They were patient. Then I saw it, over and over. Emily's signature on checks. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that my hands started shaking for the first time in weeks. Cheating had been the gut punch, the humiliation, the insult. This was different. This was survival. This was my kid's future bleeding out through paperwork while I was busy trying to save a marriage that was already dead. My first instinct was to storm into her life and throw the evidence in her face, to call the cops, to burn it down. But I didn't, because if I tipped her off, she'd erase the trail. She'd blame Tom. She'd twist the story until I looked like the villain. So I made myself a promise right there at my father's desk. I would stay calm. I would stay quiet. And I would set a trap so clean she wouldn't see it until it snapped shut. That's when I realized something worse than cheating was happening. Someone wasn't breaking my heart. They were bleeding my future. If you're watching this thinking betrayal is just about feelings, wait until you see what it does to your name, your work, and your kid's future. I called Jack back to my place that afternoon. He showed up still smelling like smoke and engine grease, like he'd come straight from a shift. I didn't waste time. I spread the folder out across my kitchen table and watched his face harden as he read. At first he didn't say anything, just flipped pages. The kind of silence that means a man is trying not to lose control in front of you. His jaw tightened. His knuckles went pale. When he finally looked up, his voice was rough. So what now? I didn't hesitate. I'm going to let her take the company. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Miles, are you out of your mind? That's Dad's legacy. That's your whole life. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. Listen, if I fight her, she'll dig in. She'll hide what she can. She'll drag this out until I'm broke and exhausted, and she'll still play the victim. Jack shook his head. So you just hand her the keys? No, I said. I hand her the keys, and the engine trouble underneath the hood. He blinked. Understanding hit him slow. She wants everything, I said. Fine. She can have everything, including the dirty part. Jack made a call that night. He doesn't talk about his connections much, but firefighters know people. Cops, inspectors, investigators. 2 days later, we were sitting in a plain office with a quiet man named Daniel Price. Mid-50s, wire-rimmed glasses, sleeves rolled up like he'd rather be working than talking. I slid the folder toward him. Daniel didn't react like Jack had. He didn't curse, didn't flinch. He just read, slow and methodical, like he was taking someone's pulse. After 10 minutes, he looked up. This isn't sloppy theft, he said. This is systematic embezzlement. Hearing it out loud made my stomach twist anyway. Daniel pointed to patterns I'd felt but couldn't name. Repeating amounts, timing, vendor structures built to look legitimate. Then he said the words that changed the size of the room. Wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy, he said. This is federal. Jack whistled under his breath. I asked the question that had been chewing through my head since sunrise. If Emily takes ownership of the company in the divorce, I said, before anyone moves on this, what happens? Daniel held my eyes. Then she owns the liability, he said, plain as day. Assets and liabilities, all of it. For the first time in months, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Not happiness, not relief, hope, cold, steady, and real. If you ever sign your name while everyone thinks you're losing, Make sure it's because you understand the rules better than they do. Daniel moved like a man who'd seen this kind of mess before. He didn't just look things over. He built it, line by line, a timeline, a map, every fake vendor, every transfer, every check that didn't match a real job. He called it an audit. To me, it felt like watching someone pull nails out of a house one at a time. While he worked, I had my own job, play the broken man. Mediation sessions, conference rooms, Emily across the table, acting like she was the wronged party. Harold beside me, tense, whispering strategies I refused to use. Every time I stayed quiet, I could feel him dying inside. Emily got bolder each meeting. The more I gave, the more she demanded. Like greed has a gas pedal and no brakes. She'd sign papers with that calm little smile, like she was collecting what she deserved. And I swallowed it, every insult, every smug glance. Every time she talked about my business like it was already hers. Because a trap only works when the person walking into it believes they're winning. I wasn't doing this for pride. I wasn't doing it to look tough. I was swallowing my dignity so my kids could have a roof later, when the dust finally settled. She thought she was negotiating a settlement. What she didn't know was that every signature was tightening the noose. Harold finally cornered me in the hallway outside mediation. His voice cracked with frustration. "Miles, I'm begging you, let me fight," he said. "She's taking you apart in there. We can object. We can stop this." I shook my head once. "We stick to the plan." His eyes narrowed. "What plan? You haven't told me a plan. You're just surrendering." That was the problem. If I said one wrong sentence, one hint, Emily would smell it. Tom would hear. Evidence would disappear. People like them don't confess when they're comfortable. They erase when they get scared. So I kept my mouth shut and let Harold think I'd lost it. Inside the room, Emily signed each new concession like it was Christmas morning. House, trucks, accounts. She didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. She'd glance at me like she wanted to see pain, and I gave her nothing, just silence. After every session, I went home and marked another day off the calendar. Not because I was waiting to be rescued, because I knew exactly when this would end. I wasn't quiet because I was weak. I was quiet because the timing mattered more than my pride. Daniel called me late on a Thursday. No small talk. That's how I knew it was big. "Miles," he said, "it's federal ready." I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the sink full of dishes I hadn't touched. "You're sure?" I asked, even though I heard the certainty in his voice. "I'm sure," he said. "It's documented. It's traceable. It holds." He told me he'd submitted his report to the right people, financial crimes, the kind of investigators who don't kick doors down on day one. They watch, they build, they wait until the case can't fall apart in court. Then Daniel's tone sharpened. "You need to do exactly one thing now," he said. "Nothing. Don't warn them. Don't threaten. Don't make her suspicious." That was the moment it stopped being about a marriage and became something colder. This wasn't heartbreak anymore. This was wire transfers, tax filings, signatures, and a clock I couldn't see ticking. Emily still thought I only knew about the cheating. She still looked at me like I was a man she'd defeated. And I let her. I kept my face calm in every meeting, every exchange, every text about the kids. Inside, though, I felt like a stretched cable, one wrong move away from snapping, because the game had left the bedroom and entered crime. After Daniel's call, I stopped measuring time in weeks. I measured it in moments with my kids. I picked Noah up for baseball practice and sat on those cold aluminum bleachers, listening to fathers yell advice they didn't realize was mostly for themselves. Noah would look over between drills, searching for me. Every time our eyes met, I gave him a nod that said, "I'm here." With Lily, it was homework at the kitchen table, fractions, essays, the quiet frustration of being a kid who can feel the tension but doesn't have the words for it. She'd ask questions, then watch my face like she was trying to read what I wasn't saying. I kept repeating one rule to myself: show up, no matter what Emily did, no matter what she tried to take. The kids don't pay for grown-up betrayal. Some nights after I dropped them off, I'd sit in my truck with the engine off and just breathe, because as the final hearing got closer, a new fear started crawling in. something I didn't want to admit out loud. Not fear of losing money, not fear of starting over. Fear that I'd collapse before this was finished. And the only thing my kids would remember is that their dad didn't make it to the other side. I wasn't fighting for cash. I was fighting to still be their father when the smoke cleared. The morning of the final hearing, I woke up at 5 like I always did. Not because I was calm, because routine is what a working man grabs when everything else is falling apart. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts sound louder. I showered, shaved, put on my cleanest button-down. No suit. I don't own one. I'm not a courtroom guy. I'm a job site guy, a man who shows up with tools, not speeches. In the bathroom mirror, I looked older than I should have. The lines around my eyes were deeper, like they'd been carved in overnight. But there was something else there too, something steady. Not happiness, not confidence, just focus. I checked my phone. No new messages, no last-minute changes. That made my stomach tighten, because silence can mean everything is about to happen exactly the way it's supposed to. I left alone. Jack offered to come. Mom wanted to sit behind me. I told them no. Some things a man has to carry by himself. In the parking lot, I sat for a second with my hand on the steering wheel and whispered, barely moving my lips, "Today's the day." I walked into that courthouse like a man about to lose everything. But deep down, I knew I was walking in to get free. This was the part where the judge thought the case was over. It wasn't. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, that stale paper smell like every bad decision ever made had been filed and stored. Emily was already there. She looked perfect. Hair done, makeup clean, cream-colored blazer like she was headed to a magazine shoot, not the end of a family. Her lawyer sat beside her, relaxed, confident. Flipping pages like this was routine, like I was routine. He glanced at me once and went back to his notes, already certain of the outcome. Harold sat next to me and didn't say much. He looked pale, like he'd been carrying my funeral in his briefcase. The judge started reading the settlement terms out loud. House transferred to Emily. Vehicles transferred to Emily. Full ownership of the company. Assets, equipment, contracts, transferred to Emily. I kept my face still, but my pulse hammered in my neck. Then the judge said the phrase I'd been waiting for, the phrase Daniel told me mattered most. All assets and liabilities. 2 words, heavy as steel. Harold's hand twitched like he wanted to object, to save me from myself. He glanced at me like this was the last moment before the casket closes. But when I heard liabilities, I felt something inside me click into place. Because that's when I knew the trap had finally bitten. When the judge said liabilities, I didn't smile. I just knew the countdown had ended. The judge slid the papers forward. Sign where indicated. I stood up and walked to the bench like my legs belonged to somebody else. The pen felt light in my hand, almost insulting. Page 1, my name. Page 2, my name again. Page 3, more initials. Over and over, clean, steady strokes. No trembling, no hesitation. Not because I wasn't scared, but because I'd been scared for weeks. By now, fear was just noise. Emily watched me sign with that satisfied little smile, like she was watching a man finally accept his place. Her lawyer leaned in and whispered something to her, and she nodded like a queen approving a verdict. When I finished, I sat back down beside Harold. He looked like he was swallowing rage. The judge started to wrap it up, voice already shifting toward the routine ending that sends people back to their lives, broken or not. That's when the courtroom door opened. Not a soft, polite crack. A full, heavy swing. The sound hit my chest like thunder. Every head turned. Even the judge paused mid-sentence. 2 men stepped in wearing dark suits, serious faces, badges on their belts. One carried a manila envelope like it weighed more than paper. And in that moment, I knew. The storm had finally arrived. I heard the door before I saw them. And in that sound, I knew someone else had taken over the room. The 2 agents didn't look around like they were lost. They walked with purpose, straight past the benches, straight toward Emily's table. The envelope stayed tucked under one arm, calm and certain, like they'd done this 1,000 times. Emily's lawyer half stood, confused irritation on his face. "Can I help you?" he started to say. One agent didn't answer. He just placed the envelope in front of him. Harold's breath caught beside me. I kept my hands folded, because any movement felt too loud. Emily leaned forward, still wearing that victory smile, still believing this was a delay, a mistake, a nuisance. "What is that?" she snapped. "What is going on?" Her lawyer opened the envelope. His eyes moved left to right once, then stopped. The color drained from his face so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His hands actually shook. Emily's smile faded. "Patterson, what is it?" she demanded, louder now. He swallowed hard, leaned in close, and whispered 5 words that changed the air in the room. "Tom Reeves was just arrested." Emily froze. Not angry, not crying, just still, like her brain couldn't find a place to put what she'd just heard. Emily snatched the paper out of her lawyer's hands like she could rip the problem in half. Her eyes moved fast at first, scanning, hunting for the part that said, "This isn't real." Then her face started to drain, like the blood was trying to leave before the truth hit. At the top, in bold, it wasn't notice or request. It was an indictment. Federal. Wire fraud. Tax evasion. Conspiracy. Emily shook her head hard, almost angry at the letters themselves. "No, no, this is a mistake," she barked, louder than the courtroom needed, loud enough to make it sound true. Then she saw the names, Tom Reeves. And right underneath it, like a nail through a board, hers. Emily Kerrigan. Black ink on white paper. No arguing with it. No crying it away. No charming it out of existence. That was the point of no return. The moment when denial stops being a shield and starts being pathetic. She looked up, eyes wild, mouth open for another excuse. But one of the agents stepped forward, voice flat, practiced. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent." And as he started reading, I watched Emily's world finally catch up to her choices. Emily's head snapped toward me like I'd pulled the trigger myself. "You knew," she hissed. Then her voice broke into a scream. "You set me up!" She lurched out of her chair, moving fast. Too fast for the room, too fast for the lie she'd been living. The bailiff caught her before she made it 3 steps. Her hands clawed at the air, reaching for me like rage could rewrite paperwork. "Let me go," she yelled. "He did this." I stood up slowly, not to threaten her, not to posture, just to meet her eyes and say what I'd been holding in my throat for months. My voice came out low and steady, the way it does when you've already cried all your tears in private. "Emily," I said, "you've been stealing from me for 3 years. You cheated for 1. You lied to my face in my home, at my table, around our kids." Her mouth twisted like she wanted to deny it, but the agents were still there. The paper was still there. "You built all of this on lies," I said, "and lies don't hold weight. They crack." She spat my name like a curse. I leaned in just enough for her to hear me over her own noise. "You don't get to steal my life and call it love." Then I straightened my shoulders. "They can take the house," I said. "They can take the trucks, but they don't get my name." The courtroom emptied out in a strange rush. People whispering, chairs scraping, that nervous energy after something big happens and nobody knows where to put their eyes. Harold just sat there for a second, staring at the table like he was trying to remember how to breathe. Then he turned to me, voice caught in his throat. You knew," he said, "all along." I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel clever. I felt tired. "I had to let her believe she won," I told him. "If she thought I was fighting, she'd hide things. She'd delete emails. She'd move money. She'd drag this out for years and still walk out acting like the victim." Harold shook his head slowly, like he'd spent his whole career believing a courtroom was where truth lived, and today it had shown him something else. "So you gave her the company." "Because I needed her signature," I said. "I needed ownership to be real, in black and white." Harold let out a long breath, almost a laugh, but it didn't have humor in it, more like disbelief. "I've never seen anything like this." I walked out of the courthouse alone. The sun was bright, too bright, like I hadn't noticed it in months. I stood on the steps and let it hit my face. I didn't feel happy. I just felt light. I didn't win because I was stronger. I won because I was more patient. The weeks after the hearing didn't feel like victory. They felt like fallout, like ash settling after a fire you didn't ask for. Tom Reeves folded first. The man who wore that clean suit and talked about efficiency pleaded guilty and disappeared into the federal system. I didn't celebrate. I just pictured him sitting in a concrete room with nothing to optimize but his own regrets. Emily tried to fight. She hired a new lawyer, then another. Her story changed every time the pressure tightened. One week she was innocent. The next week she was misled. Then it became Tom's fault, like she'd been some helpless bystander in her own signatures. But the forensic trail didn't care about speeches. Daniel's work was thick and clean: dates, amounts, patterns, emails tied to shell vendors, checks with her name on them, paperwork that matched her handwriting, her logins, her choices. In court, words are cheap, numbers aren't. Every time Emily tried to talk her way out, the evidence just sat there, quiet, heavy, and undeniable. And slowly, the life she'd demanded started to collapse under its own weight. Because you can hide feelings. You can't hide money. Emily's case didn't end with some dramatic, "I'm innocent" speech. It ended the way most real cases end: quiet, paperwork heavy, and humiliating. She took a plea deal: probation, community service, restitution. The court didn't care about her tears. It cared about the numbers. Restitution is a clean word for an ugly reality. If you owe that kind of money, you pay it back with your life. To make the payments, Emily had to sell the things she'd fought so hard to take. The house went first, foreclosure notices taped up like public shame. Then the cars, repossessed, hauled away like they were never hers to begin with. The company didn't survive. Contracts got canceled, accounts got frozen. The old shop was dissolved and the equipment was sold off at auction. I heard about it from a guy in the trade who went to look at our old tools laid out on folding tables like someone's estate sale. That's when it hit me. I didn't take anything from her. She just grabbed the wrong everything, and it crushed her. For a moment, I felt satisfaction. Then it faded, leaving only emptiness. Because watching something fall apart doesn't rebuild what it cost you. Starting over didn't feel heroic. It felt embarrassing. A smaller shop, a cheaper lease, a clean set of books with nothing hiding in the corners. I registered a new company name and opened a new business account like a man trying to breathe again after being underwater. I kept it simple on purpose. No partners, no friends of friends, just receipts, deposits, and a rule I carved into my own head. Trust is earned in inches, not handed out in miles. The first week I showed up alone, unlocked the door, and listened to the empty space. It was quiet, but it wasn't haunted. That mattered. Then the calls started. One of my old guys came by, work boots, calloused hands, eyes tired in the familiar way. He didn't ask for a speech. He just said, "Heard you're back. I'd rather work for a stand-up guy." More followed. Not because I had money, because I had a name that still meant something. I worked fewer hours, but I slept. Real sleep. The kind you don't get when your home is a battlefield. A contractor I'd never met called with a job and said, "People talk. You're solid." It felt like a test. Could I trust again? This time, I built from truth, not from fear. Emily's legal mess didn't stay in a separate lane. It bled into everything, especially custody. The court doesn't like uncertainty around kids, and once her case became public record, the judge agreed to revisit the schedule. It wasn't a win. It was paperwork, hearings, and that slow grind that makes you feel like your family is being measured in hours and signatures. In the end, I got Lily and Noah more. Not full-time, not perfect, but fair. Week on, week off, plus holidays and summers. The first night they slept at my new place, I lay awake listening for sounds. Footsteps, a cough, the little noises that mean your kids are safe under your roof. A week later, Lily asked me the question I knew was coming. She was doing it casual, like it didn't matter, but her eyes gave her away. "Dad, do you hate Mom?" I stared at the sink, then at my hands. "No," I said. "Hate is too heavy. It keeps you stuck." She frowned. "But what she did..." "I'm not excusing it," I said. I'm just not carrying it. That's the truth. I didn't forgive the crime. I just put down the anger so I could keep living. For them. When the dust finally settled, I understood something I wish I'd learned younger. Strength isn't throwing punches in every fight. It's knowing which fights will cost you your soul and walking away from those without calling it defeat. I used to think being a man meant absorbing everything, working more, fixing more, taking the blame so the house stayed quiet. But quiet isn't peace when it's built on lies. Quiet is just a delay. What saved me wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was the truth, and the patience to let it do the heavy lifting. The truth doesn't need a loud man behind it. It just needs time, paper, and daylight. I lost a house. I lost trucks. I lost the business I thought I'd carry into old age. But I didn't lose the things that actually hold you up. My kids' love, my mother's respect, my brother's loyalty, and a name I can still sign without shame. And if you're listening to this because you're in the middle of betrayal, if you feel like you're getting cleaned out, hear me, you're not done. As long as you keep your name clean, you're still standing. So here's the truth of it, plain and simple. Emily took everything in the divorce, my house, my trucks, the company I built with my hands and my father's name. She sat across from me like it was a business deal and walked out thinking she'd won. But when she took everything, she didn't just take the assets. She took the liabilities too. She took the paper trail. She took the weight. And she took it with her own signature sitting there in black and white like a stamp on her own future. I lost property. I lost comfort. I lost the life I thought I'd retire into. But I didn't lose my word. I didn't lose my kids. And I didn't lose the one thing a working man can't afford to give away: his name. If there's one lesson I'd leave you with, it's this. Don't let hate drive the wheel. Hate feels strong, but it keeps you chained. Let the truth do the heavy lifting, even when it takes time. Now I want to hear from you. What part hit you the hardest? The betrayal, the courtroom, or the rebuild? Drop it in the comments. If you know someone living this kind of storm, share this with them. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe, because the next one might sound a little too familiar.